We welcome you into another edition of the Lion Country Kia Goon Ironhead show here. We are live at Quaker Steak Lube, and as usual, starting on Facebook Live just a few moments before we join the radio audience at Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox here in the State College and Center County area. Lots to get into today. A whole lot to get into today on the show. Obviously, we are now aware that it'll be Penn State heading to the Peach Bowl and getting ready for a December 30th matchup against Ole Miss. We welcome you in on the Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox side of things now as well. Again, Penn State Peach Bowl matchup, December 30th, of course, against Ole Miss. Listen, I think it is a good matchup. I think it's one that gets the fans fired up. I mean, it's not Alabama, it's not Texas, but I think it is a very intriguing game. It's an SEC opponent, which is a big deal. It's Lane Kiffin as your coaching opponent, which is a big deal. Both teams went 10-2. I think pretty comparable teams, and I think Penn State's a slight favorite, and that seems right to me going in. Penn State's ranked 10th in the college football playoff rankings, and they are 11th. Ole Miss is 11th in those rankings. So this feels like a good matchup. And again, I think a fun game for the fans of both teams. I have to imagine Mississippi fans are excited about the opportunity for the Nittany Lions to be their opponent. And certainly, again, I think it's a good opportunity here for Penn State to get a good win. I don't know. I feel like we're going to be back in the debate about, I don't know whether it's a signature win if you get it, about whether or not this was a failure or a disappointment, not getting to the college football playoffs this year. Don't necessarily want to go down the semantics road, but it's a good win. I mean, we can certainly chalk it up as a quality win if Penn State can get this Peach Bowl victory. And of course, this will be an opportunity for the program to pick up its first Peach Bowl victory. This will be the first Peach Bowl appearance for the Nittany Lions. And if Penn State is able to do that, once again, Penn State will become the first program in the country to win all 6 of what we now refer to as the New Year's 6 bowl games. The traditional major 4 from when I was growing up, which was the Rose, the Orange, the Sugar, and the Cotton, and then, of course, the Fiesta Bowl. Thanks in no small part to Penn State and Miami agreeing to play in that game in 86 would be the 5th, and now the Peach Bowl has in recent years become the 6th, again, New Year's 6 bowl game. So Penn State with a chance to make some history in that regard when the bowl game is played. Also, from a fan perspective, I think this is terrific. A noon kickoff for the bowl game, I think, is wonderful. I think it's great for the TV viewers at home. It leaves you the night to go out and celebrate if Penn State wins, or go do whatever it is you want to do with your evening. I think if you're at the bowl game, kind of same thing. It gets the game over, and then you get to have one more night kind of exploring the scene in and around Atlanta. So I think that is a good thing. Myself for the fans that are traveling to the Peach Bowl, and I have no doubt there will be a lot of Penn State fans traveling to this year's Rose Bowl. We will certainly, or to this year's Peach Bowl. There might be a couple fans going to the Rose Bowl, who knows, but probably most of the Penn State fans will be heading to the Peach Bowl. Lots of stuff to get into. We'll touch on the Penguins-Flyers game last night. Ugh. As a Penguins fan, not a fun result, and the Penguins are continuing to hover right around that 500 mark now on the season. Early, I get it, not the end of the world, but not the result you were hoping for. Lots of Penn State football news to report on, Penn State wrestling news to report on today. The high school sports season is also getting underway, really kind of full swing now this week throughout the state, and including here in Center County. We'll touch on some of those upcoming games and the prospects for the season, but obviously we'll focus in here on Penn State football in particular, but we'll talk some college football playoff action and all of the things that went into the Florida State being left out of the playoffs decision, and why it is going to be very welcome when we actually get to the rightful 12-team playoff format next season. Also, in case you have not been paying attention, we do have the line is out. The over-under for the Steelers-Patriots game tomorrow is 3.5 points. I'm kidding, but it might as well be. Two of the most inept offenses in the National Football League, and two of the programs that are struggling mightily right now to get their offenses going. Steelers, Patriots, if you are having some trouble, you're an insomniac, you've been having trouble getting to sleep, I would strongly advise you tune in to the Amazon Prime coverage of the Steelers and the Patriots coming up on Thursday night. Philadelphia Eagles got thrashed by the 49ers, of course. We'll talk about that, get Booch's perspective on that. Devastating loss for Philadelphia. Now the Eagles have the best record in the National Football League and would be the number one seed in the NFC. Just devastating loss for the Eagles. Let's start with some of the Penn State football news. We kind of got tipped off to this yesterday, but Chop Robinson has declared for the NFL draft, a surprise to absolutely nobody, and he will forego the bowl game, and makes a ton of sense. Again, absolutely no surprise there. And waiting for some other decisions to come in here for the Nittany Lions, and did get tipped off yesterday as well that it is likely that Olu Fashanu will play in the bowl game. And it goes back to some preseason conversations that were had, and what Fashanu wanted out of his final year here at Penn State. Of course, many were surprised that he made the decision to come back for another year here at Penn State. He has certainly had a terrific season and will be a very high draft pick in the draft this spring. But again, nothing official, but the indications we're getting are that he is going to play in the Peach Bowl. But several other players will have decisions to make in that regard, and obviously we'll be watching that very closely. The other news, if you did not hear earlier today, Cael Sanderson confirming that Shane Van Ness will be out for the rest of the season with an injury. He will undergo surgery. Sanderson said likely before Christmas. Did not specify the injury, but Shane Van Ness, again, will miss the rest of the season here at 149. It'll be interesting to see what Penn State does here at 149 the remainder of the season. And let's start with just, it is a devastating loss for Shane Van Ness. I mean, it's obviously not great for the team, but this is a loaded Penn State roster. This obviously hurts, their chances to have an historic season. Although I think that is still in play. But the thing, I just feel so badly for Shane because of where he was with his wrestling. And I have, I think, made several comments in different interviews. People have been talking to me about the upcoming season. And of all of the guys on the team, and we talk about those guys jumping levels from one season to the next, and the goal is for all of the guys to make those jumps from one season to the next. I just think Shane Van Ness had made as big a jump as anybody on that roster going into this season. And again, you're talking about a guy that finished third in the country last year, so it was not a giant leap that was needed for him to be a national title contender. Obviously, I'll never be able to prove it. I just think Shane Van Ness, if he stayed healthy, was going to be the national champion this year. And it is a very good weight class. Obviously, Real Woods of Iowa is ranked number 1 and is the favorite, and more so now. I just think Shane Van Ness, the way he was wrestling, was not going to be stopped this year. He was just in phenomenal shape, was looking just as good as I think anybody we have on the roster, anybody in the country in terms of his movement, the confidence that he had, and just the overall game that he brought to the table. So I just think it is heartbreaking. And listen, he has, eligibility remaining and can apply for the medical hardship, likely would get it, and could still have 3 years of eligibility if he's able to stay healthy to use. So not devastating from that regard, and I understand that. But man, it's just tough because, again, he had done such a great job of getting himself into position to, I think, really set himself up for a national title run this year. What is going to be interesting, again, is that at 149 now, you have a couple of guys as Chris Buchanani joins us after taking care of things at the station for us. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Connor Pierce is very good and would be the listed guy as the backup at 149. David Evans, who has been at 141 with Bo Bartlett, and I mean, Evans is not far behind Bo Bartlett in terms of his wrestling ability. And Evans is one of these guys that has just evolved as a wrestler during his time here at Penn State from a good high school wrestler. But I mean, this is not a guy that was sought after by the top programs in the country by any stretch. But he has just worked his tail off and become an outstanding wrestler, and I think would be a force. And then Tyler Kasak, who you saw this past week, obviously is a highly touted recruit and does have high expectations. You'd like to see him get that red shirt because I think really he's kind of in between 141 and 149 now. He can make 141 as we saw at the Black Knight Open, but it's a pull for him. But I'm not sure, and in his first year of eligibility, that you necessarily want to be throwing him out there at 149. Although, if you let him grow into that, again, I think by the end of the year, he could be a true 49-pounder. You let him gain the experience throughout the course of the year. I don't know what his ceiling would be this season. He's got a very high ceiling for his career. Whether or not Kasak could be a guy that would be in the title mix or certainly on All-American mix by the end of the year. Yeah, I think he certainly could be at 149, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of what the thought process is there. The nice thing is you do have the 5 dates that you can play with all of those guys from an eligibility standpoint, and they can retain the red shirt. So there's no rush here to make that final decision. And I think I meant to look this up, but I think Connor Pierce has used 2 of his dates of the 5. I'm trying to remember if David Evans, I think Evans may have used 2 of his 5 as well. And then Tyler Kasak, I know, has used 2 of his 5. So
does that carry over into the postseason as well, like in football?
Well,
I mean, in football, you can the bowl game doesn't count, so you can do 4 plus the bowl.
Gotcha. No, if you wrestle in the postseason, it would you would not be able to use this as a red shirt campaign. Yeah,
got it. I mean, that makes more sense. It's an individual sport.
Correct.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, but again, they have some time to figure this out. Certainly, they don't need to figure it out until January in terms of any kind of definitive answer. And the good news is, I mean, I think all three of those guys are good options, and actually really good options in terms of having a backup. I think any of those three, if they become the guy, are guys that could get on the podium there at the end of the year if they develop. And again, they'll all need some experience, and it'll be interesting to see. I'm kind of curious to see what happens here with the holiday tournaments. I know obviously Penn State has a large contingent going to the U.S. Open. I don't think any of those three would be among those going there. So whether or not they go in unattached or attached to some of those tournaments, whether it's the Southern Scuffle or some of the Opens, I don't know what the plans are, but I think it'll be interesting to see if they try to get all three of those guys into some tournaments, at least a tournament, to just, again, get experience under their belt and maybe get a little feel for which one is looking like he may emerge as the starter there at 149. So
unfortunate. Just, I mean, the circumstances are brutal. I was listening to you talking coming in. I mean, that is just, it's just the worst.
Yeah. And, again, it's one of those things I'm sure I always try to think what fans of other teams must think, and I'm sure they're like, oh yeah, too bad. One of your 9 national title contenders is out. Now you only have 8. And I'm telling you that the replacement, none of those guys is Shane Van Ness and brings that type of potential, but they're all really good. Any of those 3 guys, again, could end up on the podium.
Well, unfortunately, what I've come to learn from reading opponent fan comments online is that we don't develop talent here at Penn State.
Not at all.
So, I mean,
that's very disappointing.
We're just donezo. I mean, all we do is we bring in polished, finished products,
throw
and
them out
just set
there.
it and forget it. Yeah. So now that we're gonna have to develop wrestlers, I don't know what Kale's gonna do. It's gonna be a big problem.
Have to completely pivot from what they've done in the previous 15 years. But endless, and again, Shane Van Ness, it's not a senior, so it's not his last go around. Yeah. So I get all of that. I mean, devastating. I use that word, and it's probably overstating it. It's just that when you see somebody who is on the cusp of greatness, and I mean, Van Ness really was there. I'm not even sure on the cusp. I think he was there. I think he was wrestling great. At an extremely high level.
And you've seen it here so many times that you can start to recognize it. And like you said, you could see it last year that you saw, okay, this is a guy who can put himself in that long list of national champions in this run Penn State's on.
And the thing is, it was such a long road back. So he was injured. Fans don't know. I think most wrestling fans do, but the general fans, if you're casual to wrestling. So Shane came in, highly touted prospect out of Blair Academy, coming out of high school. And his freshman year, true freshman year, he wrestled two bouts and had an injury that finished him for the season. And it was a long road back with the rehab from that. And while he was ready to go at the start of last season, you could see the rust, and it just kind of wrestled himself into, again, being what we saw in March, which was a true national title contender. But it had taken him so long to get to that point. And then again, he had just become a very polished wrestler here at the start of this season and throughout the course of this past offseason. The other thing is, he was a guy planning to go to the U.S. Open, and I think it was just going to be a great experience. I don't know exactly where he would have finished, obviously, but I think with the way he's wrestling right now, he could have been a very dangerous opponent down there at the U.S. Open for the other guys in the freestyle bracket. And so it's just that you feel for him because of how much he's put into it. And again, he was just at such a high level. I have no doubt that he'll get back to that level at some point, but now you're starting that process basically over in terms of the rehab and having to wrestle yourself back into that type of shape and position. So
bumming me out.
But again, from the team's perspective, it is a big loss. It's a leadership loss. I know he's a redshirt sophomore, but he was one of the many guys on that team that lead by example. But I really think he was a guy that I know he's a guy that has the respect of his teammates. And I think Levi Haynes was even quoted today at the media day as saying that he's one of, I forget how he put it, but one of his favorite workout partners anyway, because of the looks and the feels that he gives him. So tough news from the Penn State wrestling room earlier this afternoon from Cale Sanderson. Penn State, of course, has its second duel of the season coming up this Sunday against Hofstra at 1:00, and then the Nittany Lions from collegiate competition as a team are off until January 6th in that dual meet out in Corvallis against Oregon State. So again, they have plenty of time to kind of sort through and figure this out, and even January 6th, they don't need to have any definitive answers here. At really now probably two weight classes where there are questions, 149 obviously now along with 125, which again we still need to see how everything sorts itself out there. Let's just we'll come back to college football here in just a moment, but do want to touch on Penn State basketball. Listen, I know it is early in the tenure, and again, nobody is saying you need to make a change or anything like that. But man, losing to Bucknell at home is brutal. After the 4-0 start, the 0-3 run down at the tournament in Kissimmee, it was just, I thought, imperative. And we talked about last week, it was a dangerous game. I mean, it wasn't like you didn't know there was a chance that this could happen.
There was no benefit to winning and just catastrophic consequences attached to the unlikely event of a loss.
Yeah.
And yet here we are.
And listen, at Cornell, there were a couple of things that were on one hand, and I know fans never want to, you hate tipping your cap to the other team, but I will say Bucknell never flinched. And the threes that they were hitting in clutch spots was impressive. Now, Penn State's defensive end needs improvement. We knew that going in. We know that coming out. That is, right now the Achilles heel for this Penn State team. Not that there's not work to be done in other areas, but that is, they've got to get this figured out on the defensive end. I did think I thought Mike Rhodes was very genuine in the post-game press conference. He wasn't trying to sugarcoat. It's like, this is tough. Yes, credit to Bucknell, but my gosh, hopefully we look back at some point down the road and it's like, okay, this is where we realize, okay, we really do have to get back to playing as a team, get this as a cohesive unit. And again, I'm not making excuses. It's just a fact that this team, more so than any other in the country, right? I don't think there's any other team that threw all 12 players together in as short an order from the start of the season.
There's no doubt, which is why, I don't want to make it sound like I'm making excuses, but I said on Thursday when I was in, for God's sakes, the guy took the job and there was no roster. Just go throw together what you can do. I get it, the transfer portal, blah, blah. But it's not like Penn State is like a super premier destination for talented college basketball players. And to lay that at the new head coach's feet with that kind of a timetable and that kind of a situation, I don't know how much you can expect. And on one hand, you look and say the KenPom rankings have been around since 1999. Penn State hasn't lost to a team outside the top 300 in that time, no matter how bad things have gotten. And I was in school and broadcasting on the Lion during the early 2000s. And let me tell you, Ironhead, they got really bad.
Yeah.
I was forced to broadcast some absolute just trash college basketball. I'm talking about teams that won 7 games all season, got blown off their home floor by 30, 40 points in conference play. And, you can say, well, you never saw a loss that bad. I don't know. I watched us lose to Shippensburg. I've watched us lose to Maine. I mean, to Siena, which I didn't even realize was a place until we lost to basketball. And that's not the first time in my life that's happened. So and those were with players that we actually went out and actively recruited. We were like, hey, we want to give you a scholarship because we took a whole recruiting cycle to bring in, not 5 minutes in the transfer portal. So you do have to grade the guy on a curve this year. There's no question about it.
No, and again, it was brutal. It was awful, and it feels like because I really thought after those first 4 games, I mean, I wasn't putting Penn State in the Final Four, but I'm like, I think this team could be very competitive in the Big Ten. 500-ish record in the conference.
We remind you of like those mid-stage Pat Chambers teams that weren't just badly overmatched, but they weren't quite there, but they'd be a tough out every night. That's kind of what I thought the ceiling for this team was, and it could still be. Who knows?
It could, but the defensive end, again, I mean, one of the things
better is that an understatement of the show.
Yes,
the defense has to get better.
Well, I mean, the thing is, in the Big Ten,
the Eagles play better defense this weekend,
which you have to hang your hat on in the Big Ten is defense. Like that is what can keep you in games, and that's the problem right now. To me, is it's just they are struggling so mightily on that end of the floor that it's hard to see. And yes, again, I think this will get better. I think Mike Rhodes is a really good coach. I think we saw that at VCU, and I think he is pouring his heart and soul into this program. And again, we are 8 games into this, and you knew this was going to be a bit of a transition year. How optimistic you were, I guess, depended on on you and what you saw with the roster. I still think this is a talented roster, and I still think this team has the potential to be a very tough out in the Big Ten and to play with just about anybody. But I will say I thought that even after the Texas A&M game, even after 5 games into this season, I'm like, you know what? This is feeling like this could be again, not Final Four, but certainly a team that is at least going to be on the brink, it feels like, of being an NCAA tournament team. And, if some things break right, it felt to me after watching that Texas A&M game that, you know what, this could happen. And then the next 2 happened. And it's like, well, I'm not sure. Let's see how they regroup. And then, Bucknell happened. And the regroup did not happen, at least in that particular game. Again, I'm not ready to throw in the towel.
To stew on this. And only truly historic levels of incompetence will now be a disappointment for this team. So if they are anything other than terrible, in a way not seen even here in Happy Valley, which, as I just mentioned, has endured some absolutely brutal winters of terrible college basketball, will you not be a pleasant surprise for the remainder of your season? So again, look for the silver lining. There it is. The basement could not be any deeper than it is right now. Anything other than the absolute worst case scenario will be viewed as unexpected improvement.
Just to finish up with some of the other Penn State sports, then we'll take a break, and then we'll really kind of dial in here on college football and Penn State. Lady Lion basketball gets into the AP Top 25 for the first time in 9 years, ranked 25th, and then promptly goes out and gets clubbed pretty good in Morgantown last night, falling by 18 to the Mountaineers. And then we'll turn around and Sunday has to travel to Columbus to take on a good Ohio State team in the Big Ten opener. So it may be a very short-lived appearance, but a long time coming appearance in the AP Top 25 for the Lady Lions. Penn State hockey, men's hockey, splits its series with Minnesota. What's new? It feels like that's what Penn State has done with every series, losing Friday night with the teddy bear toss game, which is one of the really cool events each year at Pagola. But rebounded again very nicely. A good, solid win against a really good Minnesota team on Saturday night. And now a tough road trip here with Wisconsin in Madison coming up this weekend. And we'll see again. The Big Ten obviously just loaded in hockey talent. I think Wisconsin is 6th, I think, in the national rankings. So you go from number 7 to number 6 in consecutive weekends. But again, that's the nature of Big Ten hockey. Women's hockey swept Robert Morris. They are now 7-1 in CHA play this season. Penn State women's volleyball gets the job done in Kansas. A big win there, winning in Kansas's home arena, taking the 5th set 15-13. And that sets up a regional semifinal matchup.
To knock off a higher seeded team in an actual road game environment. And Penn State just absolutely brutalized the Kansas Jayhawks athletics program this weekend.
That is true.
Just robbed them blind.
Can't imagine Kansas is real happy with Penn State right now. And it sets up, this is going to be a really intriguing match Thursday night. So Penn State now has won 8 straight matches, going back obviously to the regular season, riding a ton of momentum. One of those 8 wins, it was against Wisconsin. Wisconsin is unquestionably a legit national title contender this year. They're the number 1 seed in the region. So this is a big opportunity for Penn State in Madison. Again, Penn State beat Wisconsin in Rec Hall, but I do think that win, along with the 8-match win streak, and Penn State is obviously very familiar. I mean, they split the 2 matches during the course of the regular season. I don't think Penn State goes in there, unlike I suspect most programs that would go into Madison at this stage of the year. Penn State is not going to be intimidated. Now, it doesn't mean that the momentum can't get going there and it just kind of overwhelms you. Yeah. But I don't think it's a situation where Penn State's going to go in intimidated. And I think even if they lose that first set, I don't think there's going to be a lack of resolve on the Penn State side. Now, again, Wisconsin, throughout the course of the season, clearly one of the top 4 programs. I would argue it was kind of between them and Nebraska over the course of the season as to who the best program was in the country, not just the Big Ten. So it is a really tough road, and I'm not I'd love to come on here and predict a Penn State win. I think that's unlikely, but I don't think it's impossible. And I do think this will be a terrific match, and I think Penn State has a legitimate shot going into it. And obviously, if they pull it off, it'll be the upset of the tournament to this point in the NCAAs this year. But that'll be Thursday night in Madison. Penn State trying to take off the number 1 seed in the region. And it would be a devastating loss for Wisconsin. Again, this is a program that has its sights set on a national title this year, and to lose in the Sweet 16 at home and not even be in your regional final would be truly devastating for that program and the fans there. So we'll see what happens on Thursday night in that one. And Penn State Wrestling did beat Lehigh. We mentioned the news there, but they did beat Lehigh 30-10, winning 7 of the 10 bouts. And I thought Penn State overall looked very good in the season opener. I'm trying to think if I'm kind of doing this off the cuff. I think that's all of the Penn State sports we wanted to touch on here. Again, obviously Penn State going into finals week. They're finishing up classes this week, and then finals week is next week. And when we come back, we'll take a break here. When we come back, do want to talk about this Penn State Ole Miss matchup, and we certainly want to talk about the college football playoffs and the committee's decision, what all goes into that. There's a couple of points I want to make, and I'm one of those that has a problem with it. I know there's a lot of people that it's like, listen, it's too bad for Florida State, but it just makes sense. I don't think it does, but we'll get into it and discuss as we continue with more of the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show. We are at Quaker Steak and Lube on a Tuesday afternoon, expecting some not so great weather to be rolling in here in the evening hours. And if you are traveling here, use a little extra caution, give yourself a little extra time here tonight. We are expecting a little bit of the slippery conditions here in the early evening hours. We are back with more of the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show in mere minutes.
Coast into fall with a new Kia from Lion Country Kia. Right now, get a 24 Kia Seltos for 5.25% APR for up to 48 months. A new Sportage plug-in hybrid at 0.9% APR. Check out our 23 Sorrento hybrid for as low as 4.5% APR. And don't forget, all 2023 and 2024 Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited warranty. Stop in and meet with one of our sales experts today and coast into fall at Lion Country Kia. We want to see you in a Kia.
Since retiring, I have spent my time searching the countryside for the hottest wings in America. I always seem to end up disappointed. You call these hot? Back off, Luigi.
Mamma mia.
Your hands it, busboy. Your wings suck! I knew I should have stuck with Quaker Steak's triple atomic wings. You think I'm tough enough?
The Center Hall Farm Store has been serving Center County and beyond for well over a half century. A small family business, the Center Hall Farm Store specializes in animal nutrition and manufactures its feed fresh using local ingredients. Get the best in horse, cow, pig, chicken, and bird feeds. If you're not already a customer, stop in and see why so many of your neighbors are. The Center Hall Farm Store at 110 West Allison Street in Center Hall, or call us at 814-364-1393.
Sioka Toyota of Williamsport invites you to stop in today or check us out online. We have the smart path to your next Toyota, like the all-new Crown, BZ4X, the all-new Grand Highlander, Corolla Cross Hybrids, Sequoias, and more. Over 100 new Toyotas here and on the way. Don't make a $1,000 mistake. Choose Sioka Toyota of Williamsport and see the Sioka dealership's difference. Buy or reserve yours today and see for yourself why Sioka Toyota is the only stop you need for your next new car. Sioka Toyota, it just feels right.
Ready to be part of something bigger? Come pave the road to success at Glen O'Haw-Baker and discover a career where your hard work and determination can build a bigger, better future. Our team believes we can build a stronger future together. Join us at Glen O'Haw-Baker, where we value teamwork on the field and on the job. Go to GOHcareers.com to apply. GOHcareers.com. And best of luck to all the Center County sports teams all season long from everyone at Glen O'Haw-Baker.
The Goon and Ironhead.
Welcome you back in here on this Tuesday afternoon. If you are watching on the Facebook Live, I forgot I meant to open up, but if you're wondering about the haircut and you're not Facebook friends with me, let me just take the so you get a good look at it here on the Facebook Live. But the kiddo, the Mad Turtle, sold $5,000 plus worth of popcorn, and we had a little agreement that if he was able to hit that very lofty and ambitious goal, that I would dye my hair any color he wanted for a week. We did that. It was pink. Ended up being pink for I think 9 or 10 days, and then he would get to cut my hair any way he wanted. And right up until the morning of the haircut, which was Saturday, he was leaning heavily toward bald. And I was like, well, in the overall scheme of things, bald, not awful.
I strongly believe that bald is beautiful.
Yeah. I was. We did this one other time for another fundraiser, and I'm like, yeah, I was very nervous about it at that time. And then I'm like, that actually isn't awful. I mean, I can live with it.
Practical, very utilitarian.
That is not what we decided on the way out. He's like, I'm going to give you his idea initially was to do a reverse mohawk. So my kiddo wears a mohawk himself, and he pulls off the mohawk very well. We were initially thinking reverse mohawk, and then we got out to the barber, and they thought it would be even more funny to do what they were calling the old man haircut, which is just leaving hair around the side but taking it off the entire top. And it is not a great look. I will be the first to admit, and I've been scoffed at over the last few days, and I'm okay with it, all for a good cause, and it is giving great satisfaction to the Mad Turtle. But
and I mean, also, man, like, just to comment, like, probably taught him some unbelievable life skills to be able to do what you need to do to sell $5,000 worth of that popcorn is pretty remarkable.
So we did have a couple of people. So we posted pictures on our personal Facebook page. We'll post pictures here on the Goon and Ironhead page, as well as the Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox page. But the other, just so people know, like, this actually was Reggie, because we had a couple of people. It's like, well, I wonder who really sold the popcorn. And it's like, nope. Like, in this case, like, this kiddo went door to door. Now, I mean, we drove him to some houses and we walked with him. Obviously, he's 8 years old. We didn't send him out and, hey, let us know when you get back. We were with him, but he is the one. I mean, he went and knocked on the doors.
Awesome.
And we were in the background. It wasn't like, hey, he's trying to sell you popcorn. It was, he went up, knocked on the doors, and made the sales. And even with a few friends of ours, and really, I would say well over 90% of his sales. I mean, it was door to door. A couple of family members that don't live in the area that we called, but same thing. It was like, Reggie, if you want them to buy the popcorn, like, you got to call, you got to sell them. And he did. So awesome. This really was, like, he earned this.
It wasn't he two big NIL deals.
Correct.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've been out a couple of times, and I've gotten stares and comments, and it's been fun. And he is absolutely loving that component of it, and very proud of his haircutting skills. And he did a good bit of the trimming. Our friend Jen did a terrific job of assisting and making sure everything was good, and there were no vicious cuts to the scalp or anything like that.
Sure.
But Reggie really did do a lot of the work on the atrocious haircut here as well. So anyways, enough about that, but did want to acknowledge that on the Facebook Live feed in particular. All right, let's talk. Let's start with the college football playoffs, and then we'll kind of zero in on Penn State football. So there's a couple of things that to me are not getting enough attention. And I've heard them talked about. I mean, it's not that they're being completely ignored, but let's start with unprecedented, and that has been very well documented, that an undefeated Power 5 conference champion doesn't get into the playoffs. So
First of all, told you so.
Yep.
I mean, it's depressing to me how consistently my rule of just approach this stuff expecting the most cynical, nihilistic result, and you will be accurate way more often than you're not. Then it wasn't that I thought Florida State should get shut out. Yep. It's that I thought they would, because I understand how this stuff works. And I hated it. I hated being right, because it was just like, oh, what's the most cynical outcome I can forecast here? Oh, clearly it'll be Alabama just knocks out a 13-0 Florida State. And they give us some falderall about backup quarterbacks, which apparently didn't apply to Ohio State, jumping over TCU to knock them out of the top 4 in 2014. So it's just ludicrous. As an Eagles fan, I know all about what you can accomplish with your backup quarterback. So anyway, I mean, just nuts. Nuts.
So let's start there, though, because there's a couple of things that don't make sense even by this criteria that they say they are now using.
Yeah.
So again, I assume everybody's up to speed here, but Michigan finishes number one in the college football playoff rankings, Washington 2, and then Texas 3 and Alabama 4. So your semifinal matchups, obviously Texas is in there against Washington, which is a very intriguing game, and I think Alabama-Michigan is a fascinating game. They dropped Florida State to 5, and then Georgia, which had been number 1 all season long, drops to number 6. So what we are being told by the committee is, listen, it's very unfortunate, but Florida State, without its starting quarterback, is just not one of the top 4 teams in the country. And, we think head-to-head matchup would not fare well against those top 4 teams. Again, if you were listening, Florida State is 5. Georgia is 6. Now, they're going to play each other. I get it. They'll settle it on the field to that degree. It doesn't matter. But Georgia is a prohibitive favorite in that game.
Sure.
If the reason you are saying you couldn't leave Florida State in the top 4 is that those 4 teams would be heavily favored against Florida State, then how the hell is Florida State 5 and Georgia 6? Why would they not be flip-flopped? That makes zero sense. And again, I get it's not egregious because it doesn't matter whether you're 5 or 6 in the overall scheme of things. It matters whether you're the top 4. But if that is your reasoning, then you just throw it out the window on the 5-6 ranking.
Yep.
So that makes no sense.
Was Cincinnati one of the 4 best teams?
Correct.
2 years ago, was TCU one of the 4 best last year? I mean, give me a break.
Well, and so yes to all of that. And here's the other thing, though. Just on so everybody is not everybody. Most of the college football experts are weighing in and saying, well, listen, Alabama. Yeah, that loss to Texas was, not great, but it was early in the season, and man, they have become a juggernaut. That juggernaut, late mid-season, struggled to beat Texas A&M, and I mean struggled.
Yep.
That is a bad Texas A&M team, at least a not good Texas A&M team. Alabama needed a miracle to beat Auburn. That is a 500 Auburn team. I get Alabama beat Georgia. Hats off to them. Great win. Maybe as good a win as anybody had in college football this season. But this is not a team that just rolled over everybody and you're like, oh, yeah, man, I don't see how Florida State or anybody in the top 10 for that matter, how would they possibly hang with Alabama?
Can I just point out and listen, this is not to take anything away from Georgia, who I think is a very good football team. I don't know that it's the best win in college football. I don't know that it's one of the top 3 wins in college football, save from the stakes and the history between the programs. But just in terms of the talent matchup on the field, the knock on Georgia since the end of the national championship game last year, when people could look online and see their schedule, is that this team's going to run the table and we're not going to know a damn thing about them 12 games into the season. And I think that conventional wisdom that existed on January 7th of this year, I think that held all the way until Saturday afternoon. Like, how much did we really learn about Georgia? Because they went to Tennessee and beat up an overrated preseason Vols team. Like, we never really got to see Georgia with their backs up against the wall. Well, I'm not sure that Michigan Michigan beating Ohio State at home or hell, beating Penn State at Beaver Stadium, that might be a better win than beating Georgia in the SEC title game.
So I want to pick up on that because I was listening to Dan Patrick. I think this was yesterday on Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox in the State College area.
Texas over Alabama is a better win than beating Georgia.
I love Dan Patrick, but he had a throwaway line in there when they were discussing the football playoffs, and they were on Florida State's schedule. And then and they were making the case that Texas and Alabama had played, tougher schedules and all of this. And then they started to, who did Michigan beat? I mean, an overrated Penn State team was one of the things they threw in there. And I'm going to push back big on that. And yeah, I get it. In the national scheme of things, that may just not be a big deal either way. You tell me how Penn State is ranked 10th. How is Penn State overrated? They're 2 losses. They lost
9.5 games. Is that where Vegas had us win total?
Yes. Yep. And they lost 2 games this season, both competitive games, to 2 of the top. Ohio State finished 7th, right? In the college football playoff rankings. So 2 of the top 7 teams in the country, the number 1 team in the country at home, and the number 7 team in their place.
Penn State possesses this magical quality of being a quality win when you need it to be, and overrated when you need it to be, but based on your argument.
So here's the other part of it. So Georgia's number 1 all season, and as you said, I mean, they were favored pretty substantially in every game.
Yep.
Penn State, I get it. You can look at their schedule and say, listen, they didn't have a lot of great wins either. But like Georgia, they went out and for the most part, and Georgia had a couple of exceptions too, Penn State really had only one exception, Indiana, where they didn't win comfortably. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Illinois and the Northwestern games were things of beauty from start to finish. But at the end of the day, they won very comfortably in every game except Indiana and obviously the 2 losses to top 7 teams. I mean, Penn State shut out Iowa 31-0. Iowa was 1 bad fair catch call away from that being the only blemish on their record, and them at least going into the Big Ten championship game being in the mix here, at least in the conversation of teams that have a shot of being in the college football playoffs.
Yep.
Again, it was 31-0. It wasn't, hey, Penn State found a way to win. It was 31-0. And Penn State, again, won comfortably in every other game. I'm not sitting here telling you that Penn State is one of the top 4 teams in the country, but they're ranked 10th. They're not overrated. That's right about exactly where they should be.
They are rated.
And you could make an argument that they could even be a spot or 2 higher. You could make an argument that maybe even a spot lower. But they're clearly this season an 8-11 team. They're ranked 10th. They're not overrated. That's absurd. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that that's an overrated Penn State team. And I love Dan Patrick. I'm glad we have him on. Fantastic show. Just a bad throwaway line.
I like Dan Patrick too, but it's emblematic of, I think, a lot of the issues around the conversation about college football, where I joke a little bit, but not really, that Penn State especially is one of these programs that just has this fungible quality where last year, and this always happens to us, we tend to have good seasons that come out of the blue, and then the next season the prognosticators overcorrect and we're expected to do better than we do, and then we're viewed as being overrated, right? Like nothing fundamentally changed other than what the expectations were, and the expectation was just that you're going to beat one of the 2 top 5 opponents on your schedule. We didn't. Now all of a sudden we're overrated. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know.
But here's the thing. I think that was the expectation here. And while people are using that nationally as a ding against Penn State, the fact is they didn't expect Penn State to win one of those 2 games.
Vegas
Penn
didn't.
State
the
was
poll
ranked.
Voters didn't.
Yes, Penn State was ranked behind both of those teams and was the underdog going into both of those games. So that, yes, around here, and I certainly was among those leading the charge. I think Penn State needed to win one of those two games to feel like you were taking that next step. It didn't happen. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think if Penn State comes out and goes undefeated and wins a national title next year, all of this is forgotten. And boy, that'll be cool if that happens.
Well, and it's so much of this is narrative driven, right? Because then if Penn State were to win a national title next year, the first year of the 12-team playoffs, it would completely rewrite the last decade of program history, the way the national conversation frames it. Then they would say, oh, well, this is proof positive that all Penn State needed was just a little more breathing room, that they just were so close, and then they got over, just like the narrative around Georgia up until the last 2 years was they've got everything you could possibly want in terms of being able to field a contending football program, but they can't get past Alabama and they can't win the big one. And that was the story, and that was the conventional wisdom and the undisputable truth up until the point they broke through. And then that rewrote the entire history of the journey it took them to get there. So, yeah, and as we sit here right now, all of these national guys just have in their heads that if Penn State can't beat one of these two good top 5 programs in their division, then they stink. They're no good at all. And every year we got to go to a New Year's Six bowl and dispel it. So hopefully we can do that for the second season in a row by beating Ole Miss this year. But yeah, I mean, now you got my blood boiling a little bit, not just about the FSU snub, but about Dan Patrick and his stupid fungible logic about who's overrated and who isn't. And we're only overrated when they need to make the argument that Michigan is ranked too high. Now, I have heard Penn State used just as often, sometimes by the same people at different times, as a quality win in case you're trying to make an argument in the opposite direction. It's preposterous.
And so this is another thing I want to get into. And I just brought up the AP preseason rankings. So Penn State, I was thinking they were 7th, and that is what they were.
Yep.
So if Penn State beats Mississippi, and we'll see how it plays out, but if Penn State wins that game, that's probably about where Penn State's going to finish, 7th, 8th. They're going to move up a couple of spots because some of these teams in front of them are going to lose. If they win that game, again, they were projected to be 7th. That's what the national experts across the board, 7, 8. I mean, that's where everybody nationally had Penn State. It was nobody had them in the top 5. I shouldn't say nobody. Very few had them in the top 5. I don't know if anybody had them outside of the top 10. They were in that 6 to 10 range. Well, they're going to, if they win against Mississippi, they're going to finish 7 or 8, which is where that was what the consensus was for sure on where Penn State was going into the season. Yep. And yet now this team's overrated. And again, they will have won all of the games they were supposed to, including a couple that were fairly close in terms of the spread, including obviously the Mississippi game if they win it, and the Iowa game where we'll see what happens with Mississippi. But so you had Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Alabama, which everybody's on this, this is just the greatest job by Nick Saban. And by the way, I actually agree with that. I think when you look at that Alabama offensive line and Milroe, but I think it had a lot more to do with that offensive line at the start of the season for Bama and where they're at now. I think it's as good a job anyway as Nick Saban has done in terms of getting his team galvanized and truly progressing throughout the course of the season. But again, it's not a juggernaut. But Alabama was projected to be 4 at the start of the season, and they're 4 here as we go into the playoffs. The teams that had truly subpar seasons based on the preseason rankings, LSU, USC big time, and Clemson big time. Like those, those are the two. So this is the other thing. So, listen, I don't think Michigan's schedule was great this year either. And Florida State certainly wasn't either. But part of it is, and this is the other thing with college football. So Florida State went out and scheduled LSU, thinking that would be, again, LSU preseason is ranked 5th. And at the time that game was scheduled, I don't know exactly when that game was scheduled, but sometime in the last 10 years. You're scheduling that game thinking there's at least a good chance that is going to be a marquee matchup.
It's an SEC opponent, so you're already going to get some credit for putting it on your schedule. By the way, that is another magical team that is used as a quality win for Alabama. And when you talk about Florida State, but it's like, it was the first week of the season. They kind of disappointed. They were supposed to be a top 10 program.
Yes.
They got 3 losses.
Yep.
The same team.
Yep.
Magically turns into a quality win for Alabama. It was later in the year, different LSU team, the Heisman Trophy winner, or likely Heisman Trophy winner. It's remarkable.
Yeah, and so I do think, I mean, part of it's just the luck of the draw on a season with the conferences. Like the Pac-12, I do think had a very strong conference at the top this year.
Yeah.
And the ACC, no question, had a down year. But, I mean, Florida State.
Still probably better than the Big Ten. Honestly, man, the Big Ten stunk this year.
Yeah, outside of the top 3 in the East, it was a tough year. Like, there's nobody. I mean, I guess you'd say Iowa certainly did a good job.
Iowa might have won 8 games in the ACC. Outside the top 3, I don't think any other team in the Big Ten would have done that.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And again, the ACC would. I mean, it's not Florida State's fault that Clemson isn't what Clemson was, and I think Clemson ended up being again a good team. However you want to define it, it's not their fault that Pitt just completely tanked it this year.
Yeah.
But I don't think. To your point, I don't think any of these teams, Georgia, Michigan, I mean, Ohio State had the win over Notre Dame, but again, that ended up being a pretty average or, not great Notre Dame team. I don't want to spend too much time on the semantics of it, but it's certainly not a Notre Dame team.
It was a quality win for Ohio State, but then somehow delegitimizes Louisville because they beat them. It's like, and then they lost to Louisville and they're in the ACC.
Correct. And that's how this game is played. You're exactly right. And so the strength of schedule, and largely uses, and this is the other thing. So it's, strength of schedule. This team ranked 55th and this team ranked 38th or whatever it is. Well, the strength of schedule, yes, is exactly that. It's the record of your opponents. Well, if your opponents are playing other good teams, right? Or versus if your opponents are playing other cupcakes, like all of this stuff, and it's hard to keep track of. I don't think any of these teams, I don't think anybody in college football plays a juggernaut of a schedule throughout the course of the season. Some teams unquestionably play better schedules than others, but pretty much every team, certainly every team that's in contention here, has 6 to 8 games that are virtual gimmies.
Yeah.
6 that you chalk up as a W, 2 or 3 that are like, man, they're really going to have to play below themselves to lose those games. And then 2 or 3 where you're like, yeah, this will be an intriguing game and we'll see kind of where they're at.
And it's just kind of a down year nationally for super talented, deep teams. I mean, honestly, if you look at, I think Notre Dame unfairly gets dinged for playing easy schedules. And listen, I'm no Notre Dame fan at all, but I think the stereotype that they play easy schedules, I don't think is correct. Although this year, it just turned out that what looked like the tough games, USC, Clemson, they play Stanford every year. These teams just turned out to be not very competitive. Really, the only teams I can think of anywhere in the country who I can look and say, like, man, they had a murderer's row schedule, were out in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
There were some, to be fair to Washington, they absolutely had to run, I think, as tough a gauntlet as anyone in the country, in that they had to play Oregon twice, they had to play Washington State, they had to play Oregon State, who were both pretty good. Oregon State was really good, and they had to play Utah and USC.
Yeah.
So I mean, not all those teams were great, but they had to play all of them. They probably had the toughest schedule. If you can probably make a pretty compelling argument that Washington ought to be the number 1 seed over Michigan.
I think you can definitely make that argument. I would make that argument. And it's not, and listen, I think So this is the other thing, and you're listening to the Goon and Ironhead show. The Dear Booch filling in for Goon today on Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox, WFXS, Pleasant Gap State College. We are at Quaker Steak and Lube in State College. The wing buffet is officially now underway, and you can come on down and enjoy a great selection of wings tonight. We would encourage you to do just that. Kick back, get out of the pending weather, and enjoy some fantastic sports action as well. Great service down here. Can't stress that enough as well. Obviously, they have the full bar, fantastic beverage opportunities for you as well. And again, we encourage you to come on down, check out Quaker Steak and Lube this evening or anytime. Great place to watch all of the bowl games, NHL action, NBA action, college basketball, NFL action, all of it on the TVs here at Quaker Steak and Lube. And again, our thanks to Sioka Motors and Lion Country Kia, both fantastic places to head over and get your next vehicle. So the other thing, and then we'll finish this up, is okay, you're trying to get. So what they're going to tell you now is that, listen, the resume of Texas and Alabama is just better. I think that is, number one, debatable. But even if you buy that, okay, there's two things that I want to point out. One is there is nobody, well, I don't think there's anybody that thinks that had Georgia defeated Alabama, okay, if Georgia beats Alabama, and it's a very close game, and everything else plays out the same, is there anybody anywhere, including the most ardent diehard Texas fan, who thinks Texas is jumping Florida State in that situation? Texas looked really good against Oklahoma State. Florida State, I'll admit, it was not a thing of beauty watching that game with Louisville. If just that one change occurs, Georgia beats Alabama in a close game, I think there is zero doubt that your top four teams, you have four unbeaten teams, four conference champions, and I think your four teams that are in the playoffs in that scenario. And I don't think you even hear complaining about it. It's like, man, I think maybe Ohio State or Texas was better. But, yeah, I mean, you got four undefeated teams as conference champions. Of course, those are the four teams. Like, I think there's virtually zero dispute or argument about it. And I think there's no chance that those aren't your four teams, that it's Georgia in as number one, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State in that order,
yes,
and Texas 5. Texas is not going to jump Florida State if Georgia beats Alabama. Well, Georgia beating Alabama has nothing to do with whether Texas is a better team than Florida State or Florida State is a better team than Texas.
But it does.
The issue became to justify getting Alabama in,
you
had to
put
in
Texas in.
Right.
Yes.
And so that and
Alabama carried Texas into the playoffs.
And so they talked themselves into, well, the only way we can do this then is to slide Florida State down, and now we'll have to make the argument, which they've done. But the fact is, they don't believe Texas was more deserving than Florida State. And again, I can't prove this, but I know it, that Florida State was going to be in if Georgia beat Alabama. If everything else played out exactly the same. I mean, exactly the same. The Florida State-Louisville game is what it was, and the Texas pummeling Oklahoma State the way it did, those scores are exactly the same, but Georgia edges Alabama. There's no chance. I mean, Texas is not in there at number 4. It's Florida State as 4 and Texas as 5. And that eats at me as much as anything, because it's not that they truly believe Texas is better than Florida State. It's that because of the way everything played out, they're like, oh, man, we can't justify. And that was what the real argument should have been, and it was a tough one, is, all right, do we take either Texas or Alabama? To me, because of the resumes, the three teams that should have been automatically in were the 3 unbeatens. Florida State, to me, should not be a debate. And what they're coming back with the argument now, and a lot of the national talking heads are on board. It's like, well, yeah, but man, these are such better matchups. And because of Florida State's quarterback situation, and yeah, it's unfortunate, but man, well, there is no other sport where we would do this. Right? Like, and it would be preposterous.
Sorry,
if in the NFL,
listen, we're just awarding the championship to Georgetown because there's no way Villanova can stack up against this team. They're juggernauts.
Right, and let's start, tinkering
Hoyas
with
are national title.
I just and that just to me.
Sorry, what? Tom Brady versus Nick Foles? Okay, give me a break. Anyway, put another Lombardi in the trophy case.
Well. Yeah,
New England.
And listen, these are all projections. That's the other part of this is yes. Do I think, if put truth serum in me, do I think these are going to be 2 better games than Florida State against any of these 4 teams? Yes, I think that going in. It doesn't matter what you think. Listen, if it was all on what you think, and what we think is going to happen, therefore we need to put these teams in. Everybody thought, and I mean everybody thought, Alabama was going to handle Auburn like that. Right, Nobody saw that. The most diehard Auburn fan wasn't sitting there telling you, I think we're going to be up with a really legitimate shot of winning this game. It's going to take a 4th and 30 or whatever it was.
If we're using figure skating logic in scoring these teams, which is what we're doing now, right?
Yes,
like the games don't matter as much as the quote unquote eye test. Couldn't you just say, like, it's so preposterous that you were in that situation to begin with? And it was so ridiculous that Auburn allowed you to convert a 4th and 31 that even though you did it, we're going to proceed as if you didn't. Like, the odds of that happening were so low. And the level of stupidity and incompetence on the part of Auburn to allow you to do it and you to find yourselves in that situation in the first place leads us to say that since we're disregarding the results of the games anyway, we're just going to throw out your W over Auburn because you didn't deserve to win that game. So you know what? Your record says you're 12-1, but in the eyes of the committee, you're 11-2, and we're not going to put a 2-loss team in. And if that logic sounds ridiculous to you, frankly, it's not too much more absurd, given the way college football has operated for the last 75 years, than taking a team of Florida State's pedigree and their accomplishments on the field this year and just saying, like, hey, too bad, so sad, you don't get in. And there was a level of disingenuousness even in explaining how the committee got to that point, because they didn't even acknowledge that it was not going to be their 3rd-string quarterback, the true freshman, whose name just popped out of my head.
Yeah.
But it's going to be Tate Rodemaker, who is going to be the starting quarterback. So they kept referencing, like, we saw XYZ in the ACC championship game. Well, it's like, well, guess what? That guy's not going to be the starting quarterback in the playoff, which and you're gaslighting us as if you believe we're too stupid to realize that ourselves, or to realize that it, and you're bald-facedly lying about it when you're being asked. Like, I know you're being dishonest, and you're talking to me as if I'm so dumb I don't realize it. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, listen. To me, the resume has to matter, and at the end of the day,
I hate that they did it. I hate almost more that they treat us as if we're so obtuse and dumb that we don't know what's going on. Like, that gets to me even more. It's like, don't urinate on my leg and tell me it's raining, which is what Boot Corrigan and all the talking heads on ESPN. I don't know why we can't just come out and say, look, this is where it's at. This network has an exclusive broadcast rights deal with the SEC. Well, there are 2 conferences that matter in this sport, and the rest of them don't. And we are trying to, A, send the signal to America and to the ACC that you guys are outside the castle walls, and B, kind of implicitly send the message to Drew Weatherford and everybody else on the Florida State Board of Trustees that the time to buy your way out of the SEC was yesterday, right? So let's get that ball rolling.
Yeah,
That's the truth of the matter. I wish people could just be direct about it.
yes, and I think again, at the end of the day, what I think clearly should have happened, and yes, it would be unfortunate for Alabama and the SEC, and yes, at first blush, it's like, man, are you crazy? The SEC has won more national titles than anybody else in the playoff era, and it's not even close, but it's supposed to be this season.
Yep.
And the 4 teams that should be in the playoffs are Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Florida State, and not in that order. It should be either Michigan or Washington, then the other, then Florida State, then Texas. And yes, Alabama should be 5 and Georgia 6. And Alabama had a chance, and you had Texas at home. Georgia had a chance. You were in the SEC championship game. You lost those opportunities. You are the next 2 out. SEC, really good as always at the top, but this year, just not quite good enough. That's the way it is. To me, this shouldn't have been that hard, but it was because of exactly what you just said. It's I think they got into that room, and it's like, no, we can't leave the SEC out. So we've got to
put the SEC in,
heavily reliant on it, and to get the SEC in again, we've got to get you. You could not put Alabama in over Texas. I mean, you could, but even more of a firestorm, I think, would be there if you're saying every game matters, and these two teams met on the field in Tuscaloosa, and Texas again won, not with a 4th down and 30 miraculous conversion. I mean, they controlled that game. Dominated, it's probably going too far, but I mean, they were clearly the better team that day.
Yes.
Like, it was not close. And again, that was at Alabama. You can't just overlook that and say, well, yeah, Alabama's win over Georgia supersedes that because it's the end of the year, in my mind. To me,
when you think about Georgia going wire to wire number 1 until they get to the SEC title game, largely off the back of their performance the 2 previous seasons. So like a bunch of guys who are having great seasons for the Eagles now were the reason why Georgia was so unbelievably dominant defensively. They're all gone. They're all in the NFL. But of course, okay, preseason, it's like, well, all right, we know Georgia's still got a talented team, benefit of the doubt, your resume, your body of work. You start as number 1. They don't really face a test, a definitive measuring stick game on their regular season schedule in the way that really every other team in the top 10 did at one point or another. Maybe till you get down to Penn State, and you can argue that one way or another, but Penn State's not in the national title conversation. Once you get down to 9 and 10, you're talking about Mizzou and Penn State. These were teams that were not even in the discussion. And that's how they managed to float all the way to the SEC title game at number 1. It's going back to our conversation earlier, Ironhead. Like, I don't know how great that win over Georgia is for Alabama. If Georgia had started out ranked where, let's say, Tennessee was, I think they were like 11 or 12. They wouldn't have been number 1 going in the. They might have been like a spot ahead of Alabama. They would have moved up probably about 7-8 spots.
Yeah, that's probably accurate. It just I don't know. It's a mess. It is unfortunate. If we did have the 12-team format, and if woulda, coulda, shoulda, all of that, this would be a lot of fun. I mean, I am looking forward to next season because, and I get it, there are people that are like, you're always going to have a debate, 12, 13. Yep. And it's going to be legitimate debates, and there's going to be people that will feel rightfully wronged. You're right. That is always going to be the case. The difference is here next year, right? You feel like you are getting all of the, it's rare that you have, and I'm not saying that you can't have an 11 or 12 seed or that it won't happen where an 11 or 12 seed gets hot and wins the national title, but you feel like you have the teams that have definitively shown throughout the season.
Yeah.
We're usually in that 4 to 6, maybe 7 range where it's like, boy, those teams feel like they're national title teams. Now, again, it's college sports, it's sports in general. Crazy things can happen. And yes, can I see a 12 seed or certainly a 10 or 11 seed even next year, but one of these years winning the national title? Of course. And is it possible that the team that's sitting there as the 13 seed could have been that team that was red hot? Sure. But it feels like in that 4 to 7 team range almost every year here. Like that feels like your teams that have been consistently, they feel like those are the national title contenders. And then you're throwing a good number of other teams in the mix, which I think is great and strongly preferable to what it feels like here, which is, I think there's at least 3 other teams that if they're in the playoffs, I think 5, 6, 7 here, certainly Florida State, I think would be in the mix. Again, yes. Do I think Georgia, Ohio State, even at 7, all would be favored over Florida State with its backup quarterback? Yes. But do I think Florida State would have a chance in those games? I do, but ultimately it doesn't matter what I think. And that's my point.
Yes.
Is it doesn't matter what any of us think. They, to me, have clearly earned it on the field. And again, we've seen blowouts, and even if they went in and got blown out, right, that, it was like Notre Dame those years where they went in and got blown out. It's like, well, right. And those teams, Georgia and Alabama, were better in those particular years, in those particular matchups. But it's the same thing that happens in the Super Bowl. Like sometimes it's just, it doesn't mean that the team that got blown out didn't deserve to be there, right? It's just, they earned it. They did it by the regular season. They won the playoff games. And yeah, it stinks when you get a championship game like we had last year with Georgia TCU, or you get an AFC or NFC championship game or a national semifinal game that's a blowout. It stinks for the fans and fans in general, and obviously for the fans of the losing team in particular. But that's the nature of sports. Again, there will be blowouts here as well.
It
doesn't justify not having them in the games, in the playoffs.
It's so counter to the way the playoff field has been determined in the 4-team playoff committee era. Because to your point, look, did you kind of know that Cincinnati was going to get boat raced and you might get a more competitive game by putting in an 11-1 Notre Dame team over an undefeated Cincinnati? The eye test kind of told you that, but you know what? Notre Dame's one loss was to whom?
Yeah.
Cincinnati. So Cincinnati got in. There's always been this idea in college football that for as goofy as our system of selecting a national champion has been, and it has absolutely been silly. Like I told you, one of the great illuminating moments of my life as a sports fan, that is somebody who covers college football, was this year before an episode of the Players Show, listening to Goon, Penn State football player from one generation, explain to Hakeem Beamon, a much younger Penn State football player of a totally different generation, how and why Goon's undefeated 1994 Nittany Lions were not credited with a national champion. Because you forget how time passes, how young these guys are. They never knew anything other than the BCS and the playoff era.
Yeah.
Totally blew his mind that at one point we just had this system where everybody just played their season. Then we let a bunch of people vote on a popularity contest at the end. But even then, even the popularity, mythical national championship era, there was always this sense that the games matter. It's why BYU got to claim a national championship during the 1980s, because the games mattered. Every game mattered. And it is just crazy to me when I think about the effort and the difficulty that it takes to go undefeated in a Power 5 season, including with 2 neutral site or road wins over SEC opponents.
Yeah.
That to see those kids, that whole football team, that whole program get denied an opportunity to prove the eye test wrong, which happens all the time, which happened this weekend, by the way. Credit to you for being right and not jinxing the Huskies.
Yeah,
a lot of people thought
Oregon.
I thought Oregon was going to win. Mike the Mailman thought Oregon was going to win. Vegas thought they were 10-point favorites.
Yeah, I mean, it was overwhelming.
That game didn't even feel particularly close to me at any time. I thought Washington looked like the better team from pillar to post.
Yeah.
And so it just stinks for all the kids in that Washington program to get told your number 2 quarterback, who, by the way, was good recruit. Like, you're not at Florida State if they don't think you're a good quarterback. I mean, the rest of you don't even matter. Nothing you've done matters. None of it matters. You don't even get a shot.
My final point, and then we will move on, and we'll talk some Penn State, Mississippi when we come back, and we'll look ahead a little bit to the NFL and maybe get into some other stuff as well. But my final kind of parting shot on this, I'm seeing a lot of talk of, we'll find out when Florida State plays Georgia. I am here to tell you, I have no idea how that game's going to go. I don't know how either of those teams, what the mindset is really going to be. They both, going into this last weekend, I guarantee you both of those locker rooms were 100% thinking national championship and that it is there for us. I don't know how either of those teams react. But I'm also hearing this talk that, Georgia's going to crush Florida State, and that'll prove that the committee got it right. One, I don't know that's going to happen. Two, I don't care if Georgia wins that game 70-0. It does not prove the committee got it right. I don't care if these 2 semifinal games are the greatest games in the history of college football. They're both decided in overtime. They're fantastic games. The national championship game is even better, and Florida State gets crushed by Georgia. I don't care if all of that happens. It still does not make what happened here and the decision process correct. It 100%. Means that those games went the way they did. And yes, if the goal is to create great matchups, kudos. I think you may have done that. We'll find out. I've thought in previous years I could hardly wait for certain games, and then we got them, and it's like, oh man, that ended up being a dog. I thought TCU Georgia was going to be a good game last year. I thought Georgia would win. I didn't think Georgia was going to win 60, whatever it was. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be that bad of a beatdown by Georgia. But it's just like, to me, it would be the equivalent of, again, you if you had a team, like the Steelers last year, just missed the playoffs. If you ended up having a couple of lousy games in the first couple of rounds, do you turn around and say, yeah, they should have put the Steelers in? No, because they didn't earn it. They didn't have the record to get them in. Like, that stuff just drives me crazy. But it is what's going to happen. And again, if you're pinning me down, do I think Georgia's going to beat Florida State? I do. Do I think these are going to be 2 really competitive games in the college football playoffs? I do. But I'm telling you, even if all of that happens, they got this wrong. This is not how this should be decided based on, hey, I think this is going to be a good game or not a good game. That is, and even if it turns out, again, that part of it is right, it doesn't justify you taking away from the accomplishments that Florida State had during the course of its season. It just doesn't. And that's my final thought. We will take a break here. We are back with much more. We'll talk a little bit about this Mississippi matchup. Again, I don't think it's the best possible matchup in terms of interest that Penn State could have gotten, but I think it's pretty doggone good. And I think at the end of the day, considering there were a lot of people pushing that, it looks like Penn State Liberty. Thank you. Thank you for Mississippi. Yes. Do not give us Liberty. Give us Ole Miss every day of the week. We're back after.
Coast into fall with a new Kia from Lion Country Kia. Right now, get a 24 Kia Seltos for 5.25% APR for up to 48 months. A new Sportage plug-in hybrid at 0.9% APR. Check out our 23 Sorrento hybrid for as low as 4.5% APR. And don't forget, all 2023 and 2024 Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited warranty. Stop in and meet with one of our sales experts today and coast into fall at Lion Country Kia. We want to see you in a Kia.
Since retiring, I have spent my time searching the countryside for the hottest wings in America. I always seem to end up disappointed. You call these hot? Back off, Luigi.
Mamma mia.
What hands it, busboy? Your wings suck! I knew I should have stuck with Quaker Steak's triple atomic wings. You think I'm tough enough?
The Center Hall Farm Store has been serving Center County and beyond for well over a half century. A small family business, the Center Hall Farm Store specializes in animal nutrition and manufactures its feed fresh using local ingredients. Get the best in horse, cow, pig, chicken, and bird feeds. If you're not already a customer, stop in and see why so many of your neighbors are. The Center Hall Farm Store at 110 West Allison Street in Center Hall, or call us at 814-364-1393.
Sioka Toyota of Williamsport invites you to stop in today or check us out online. We have the smart path to your next Toyota, like the all-new Crown, BZ4X, the all-new Grand Highlander, Corolla Cross Hybrids, Sequoias, and more. Over 100 new Toyotas here and on the way. Don't make a $1,000 mistake. Choose Sioka Toyota of Williamsport and see the Sioka dealership's difference. Buy or reserve yours today and see for yourself why Sioka Toyota is the only stop you need for your next new car. Sioka Toyota, it just feels right.
Ready to be part of something bigger? Come pave the road to success at Glen O'Habaker and discover a career where your hard work and determination can build a bigger, better future. Our team believes we can build a stronger future together. Join us at Glen O'Habaker, where we value teamwork on the field and on the job. Go to GOHcareers.com to apply. GOHcareers.com. And best of luck to all the Center County sports teams all season long from everyone at Glen O'Habaker.
The Goon and Ironhead.
Again, the Deer Booch filling in for Goon today, and we are happy to have you along for the ride. Penn State Ole Miss in the Liberty Bowl. Again, Chop Robinson becomes the first Nittany Lion to officially announce that he is opting out of the bowl game and is making himself eligible for the NFL draft. I think zero surprise there.
No.
The indications we're getting is that Olu Fashanu is going to play in the bowl game, which, again, there was a lot of question as to whether or not he would come back next season. A lot of people that think that was a foolish decision, but I think this is a kid that obviously loves playing college football. And it sounds like this was a discussion that kind of went back to the preseason and his decision to be a captain. Not that it was his decision. Hey, you want to be a captain, but I mean, to be a captain, I think they, want you to stick around for the entire season. And obviously, it sounds like, again, nothing official, but it sounds like he is going to. Several players that do have that decision here still to make, regardless of who does or doesn't play. Again, I do think this is an attractive bowl game. It's obviously an SEC opponent. I think Lane Kiffin is your opposing head coach. Adds an extra level of intrigue. And I think this is an evenly matched game. I mean, Mississippi is a really good team. I think Penn State is not overrated. I think Penn State is a really good team. And I think this should be a really fun game for Penn State's first trip to the Peach Bowl. I think justifiably there's a lot of fan interest, and there will be a very strong Penn State presence in Atlanta for this game on December 30th.
Yeah. First-time opponent for Penn State as well, which I think adds some intrigue.
Yep.
I think probably, look, we just spent, 40 minutes ragging on the committee for their decision to put Alabama in over Florida State. And what drives that? It's that this is a brand-driven sport. So as good as Missouri's football team is, and they're very good this year, I think I've had a chance to watch them a few times this year, and they're legit.
Yep.
Ole Miss just has a little bit more brand strength behind them right now than Missouri does. I think it just adds a little bit more juice. Plus, I love the contrasting styles of putting the Penn State defense, even with a few opt-outs, there's enough depth and talent that we're excited about for next season, up against the high-powered Lane Kiffin coordinated Ole Miss offense. And I am very curious, Ironhead, to see what with some thoughts thrown in from Andy Kotelnicki.
Yep.
What Jawan Sider and Ty Howell come up with to build on what they did against Rutgers and Michigan State against that, I think a just okay Ole Miss defense. They might be a little bit underrated actually defensively, just because of kind of the perception,
the caliber.
Yeah, the perception in the SEC is that if you're giving up any points at all, like defense stinks. But I think it's a good favorable matchup on both sides of the ball for Penn State. I think it's a winnable game. I think it'd be a quality win if we get it, and would help justify the entire season in the same way that defeating Utah was last year.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting, and contrast it with potentially playing SMU or Liberty, or like I said, even Mizzou. It's a nice matchup for Penn State. So yeah, I'm very pleased. Very pleased.
And as that guy that tends to fall asleep in the games that kick off at 8:00 or later, thank you for the noon kickoff on a Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely.
I will definitively make it to the end of this game without even struggling, and then be able to go out and enjoy the evening. And I do like the way I like that part of the schedule. I mentioned earlier in the show. I just think it's fun for fans then to be. You can sit back and watch the rest of football, whether you're stewing over a loss or celebrating a win. It's like, all right, that's out of the way. Now I can watch the other games and just not have the overwhelming feel of anticipation for a game coming up. I also like the fact that it is on December 30th. I like that the semifinal games are on New Year's night instead of New Year's Eve. I think that should always be the case, but
100%.
I like everything about the way this is kind of shaping up this year. And I think there's some good matchups. I was dreading the possibility of a Penn State Liberty game. It just
again, going back to committee logic, it's somewhat ridiculous, in my opinion, that Liberty is playing in a New Year's Six bowl. And if we are going to make this the year of the eye test, I don't care about the results on the field or what your record says. I just don't think you're very good. To put the Liberty Flames in a New Year's Six bowl is preposterous. Look, Oklahoma should be playing in that bowl game. But if you're going to give it to a group of five, and this whole thing, in a way, I guess I'm glad in a way that we have finally taken the mask off, and going forward, we can just say what everybody knew anyway. It's like, there's not a power 5, there's a power 2.
Yeah.
And Danny DeVito from Twins. Okay. That's it. And so, but if you're going to give it to a group of 5 team, and you're already going to spurn Florida State because it's like, we don't care that you're 13-0. We just kind of secretly think you stink. You're not going to put SMU in after beating Tulane over Liberty. I mean, come on. Like that bowl matchup it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It is. That is not fun. And it's not going to be fun. I get Liberty fans. It'll be fun going to the destination and having the opportunity.
Yes, the bowl's a great time.
But watching your team
Great
get
trip.
Absolutely blitzed is not going to be fun. And again, it's not
a very
I just don't think it's an
unsatisfying
enjoyable
year for Oregon ultimately now too,
Very,
because Bo Nix is I believe not going to play in that game.
Yeah.
And you have the 2 losses to Washington, and now you don't get the opportunity that Penn State is going to have, which is to try to spin some momentum going into the next year.
Yeah. No, that's all fair point. Couple of other notes. Trace McSorley getting signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers is really cool. Would love to see him get the opportunity. Now, I'm not wishing any ill will, obviously, on Mitch Trubisky, but it just would be cool, if it comes about, to see Trace McSorley in a Steelers uniform and see what he could do. So that's just a neat footnote. I mentioned earlier in the show, but if you don't follow Las Vegas, the over-under on that game is 3.5 for the Steelers and the it's not really, but it might as well be. The Steelers and the Patriots on Thursday night may set football back a good 30, 35 years. Anyway.
Honest to God, how is New England going to score any points in that game?
I don't know if the Steelers defense that showed up, or more accurately didn't show up this past week. I don't know. And I didn't see it. Full disclosure, I've read enough about it. obviously I was up at Rec Hall for the Lehigh match, and I was trying to figure out why it was. I figured it was weather, but I'm like, this game is delayed, but that is. And the Steelers just seem to be good for one of those, at least one of those every year. And it certainly was.
They are the most
embarrassing loss,
baffling team in the NFL to me.
Well,
right
this one, I don't know. The Patriots are awful, and the Steelers with that defense, yes, should pitch the shutout. And if they can find a way to score a field goal with that offense, and they ought to be able to do that, they should win the game. But I keep coming back, and I was listening to Colin Cowherd on the way over this afternoon, and he's talking about Belichick just needs to give it up, like it's over. It's been a great run. You'll go down as one of the greatest, but you're not rebuilding this thing in New England, and your style. Cowherd making this argument, not me, that your style just isn't working and won't work in today's NFL, and there's not another Tom Brady out there to go, even if you go to another situation.
I've told you my theory on Belichick, right? I can't remember if I have or not.
I don't think so.
Preseason, this was my prediction, that things were going to go south in New England, that Bob Kraft was going to be ready to move on, and Belichick would be open to a change of scenery. Here's, I think, the final act of Bill Belichick's career. I think he goes back to Cleveland. Because think about it. What does that guy love to do more than anything? He loves to do two things: get revenge, and give the middle finger to the rest of the league. So I think it eats at him to this day that he is perceived as having been a failure in Cleveland, when, if you go back and watch that 30 for 30, I had actually kind of forgotten the extent to which he was building there, and knowing what we know about him now, like clearly had things rolling in the right direction. Yeah. And then Art Modell comes out and announces, without even telling him beforehand, by the way, that he's moving the franchise to Baltimore. So I think it has always galled Belichick that he had to, when he was doing everything right and got sabotaged by his owner, go back and rehab his career by crawling back to Bill Parcells and being a defensive coordinator for 2 more stops. What would be a better way to satisfy his need to scratch that itch and just prove definitively to everyone who the real GOAT is, if he could go to the Cleveland Browns and make that team competitive again? I mean, it to me, it just seems too perfect.
That's interesting. I have not heard that. But
and you think about where Cleveland is sitting right now. If they miss the playoffs and his agent calls them up. Yeah,
you would think. Yeah, that would be an interesting scenario for sure. Hadn't thought about that as the landing destination, but yeah, I mean,
there are other places he could go. You know, people talk about the Chargers.
Sure. Well,
they talk about some of these other teams that are like ready built. No. I think Bill wants to. My whole theory about why he signed Cam Newton was he was like, I think this guy is washed up. I don't even personally like him. He doesn't fit my offensive philosophy whatsoever. So I'm just going to ratchet up the degree of difficulty and see if I can win even with all of those things. To me, the appeal of being able to just stick it to everybody, prove he's still got it, and rewrite that one part of his career that I think it just galls him.
Yeah.
Look at how long has that guy held a grudge against the Jets?
Oh, no doubt.
I mean, to this day, he still holds a grudge against the Jets. I think there is a part of him that wants to go back and just stick it to everybody who criticized him. He was the head coach of the Browns. Stick it to the Art Modell estate. I mean, he's dead, right? Art Modell?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's dead. I guarantee he still holds a grudge against him. That's my theory.
He's got to make the announcement that he's taking his talents to Cleveland.
Yes, the
right?
Bill Belichick redemption tour.
This Steelers-Patriots game Thursday night is just going to be ugly. Hopefully, as a Steelers fan, Pittsburgh at least is able to win this one and get back. I mean, the amazing thing is they still control their own destiny as far as the playoffs. I mean, with the way this offense in particular has played,
They really are
It is
Iowa.
astounding.
I mean, they are Iowa this year. Same uniforms, fire the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Get into a position where you don't belong, despite like very obviously stinking based on the eye test.
Yeah.
Great defense, horrible offense. It's the same team.
Yeah. Yeah. Long tenured coach who wins, but not big enough for the fan base and all of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
I don't
Yes.
know. We'll see.
Good.
Hopefully,
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, you're right.
Hopefully, the Steelers get the
old school guy
rebound
in a new school world.
But Belichick, I will say, has now it was Belichick and Brady. I get it, but Belichick has certainly had Tomlin's number over the years here. So we'll see. I'll watch it. I'll hate myself for doing it all throughout, but. Although I do think there's actually a pretty good chance the Steelers win comfortably and have a pretty decent showing. I mean,
if they can open up a 10-point lead, it's over, right?
I just don't. You would think. I really don't understand. Losing to the Cardinals is one thing, but to get crushed and to not be competitive,
to get worked,
and again, I was listening to the radio broadcast after we got done with the wrestling, and they must have said 7 or 8 times that like we don't know what's going on. Like this just does not look like this. And they're talking more on the defense, but they said a couple times. I mean, really on both sides of the ball, like it doesn't feel like the effort's there. It doesn't feel like there's any kind of cohesion or comprehension of what it is they wanted to do or any of that. So we'll see. Sometimes after a loss like that, a short week, and I'm not a big fan of the short weeks, but sometimes it's like, let's just get out and play football, not worry about all of the other nonsense. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm curious to see how this game plays out on Thursday night. The nice thing is, from the Steelers' perspective, is getting that break then afterward and trying to hit that reset button a bit. Hopefully they can do it after a win, which would be significant if they can get it here even over the lowly Patriots. Your Philadelphia Eagles, devastating loss, Booch. Now they're just in first place in the entire NFL with the best record and home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. But fairly significant game coming up against
Dallas.
Who is it? The Cowboys.
Big game in Dallas, where they have not lost this year, where they are thirsty for blood after the outcome of the earlier game in Philadelphia. Yeah, Ironhead.
But Dak Prescott isn't playing well, so you got that for you. He's struggling right now.
And the defense looked so impressive against San Francisco on Sunday afternoon. I will say Shaq Leonard was down to Dallas or Philadelphia and announced he would not make his decision until after the Eagles game. And despite seeing all of that, or maybe because of the way that went, he did still make the decision to sign with Philadelphia and the coach with whom he is fairly familiar in Nick Sirianni. I mean, look, very painful to lose a game that way again, to just get worked on your home field. After all of a year's worth of smack talk from the 49ers and their fans, to just get your doors blown off in that way was not a lot of fun. On the other hand, I can't tell you that I was especially surprised by it, because you were talking about you don't like short weeks. San Francisco was coming off 9 days of rest. The Eagles were playing their third game in 10 days, and it's not like they were playing cupcakes either. We've talked a lot when times I've been in here filling in for Goon. This stretch of the Eagles' schedule is absolutely brutal, and they're the defending NFC champions, so they get everybody's best shot. And we were getting the best shot from the Dolphins, the Chiefs at Arrowhead, the Buffalo Bills, so.
You guys didn't have to play the Cardinals, though, in that stretch, did you?
I know. We did, but we will, actually. We got them coming up. But, not too shocking to me. And, again, we'll see how they look against Dallas, and that's going to be very important, even if they lose that game, because, again, Dallas, just like San Francisco, will be coming off 9 days rest. I do expect them to look better. Sometimes those type of games just get away from you. And fortunately, in the NFL, you don't have a shadowy committee using the eye test to determine who gets in and who doesn't. So a 1-point loss and a 40-point loss in the NFL are the same on the only metric that matters. And the first thing, and I was thinking about this all week, so I had it in the queue. First thing I did to my Eagles fan friends when we got to the end of that game, and it was clear it was long over.
Yep.
I was thinking about every long-time Philadelphia Eagles fan remembers 1994 season. San Francisco absolutely went out and loaded up in the offseason. They got Deion Sanders from Atlanta. They just loaded up on both sides of the ball. And I think it was like week 5, week 6 of the season, Philadelphia went out to San Francisco and blew the doors off that team. They beat the 1994 San Francisco 49ers in Candlestick Park 40-8. And I remember, that was one of the greatest regular season games I have watched in decades of being an Eagles fan. And how much did it matter to either of those teams' fortunes in the postseason? Not at all. And San Francisco ran away with the Lombardi Trophy that year. I think it was a 92 season. Philly absolutely worked the Washington Redskins in both regular season games, including a game where they killed them. And then they had a rematch in the postseason, and we know how that turned out. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. It's probably, what was it? What was the first, the 1 year in the 90s? 91, because it was 91. It was the year that Washington won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if I take solace in anything, it's that there are examples, and you can go back into league history, but even in Eagles history, where you have a regular season outcome that you think, oh man, like that's a preview of, no, it's a preview of nothing. And sometimes I think it is actually better to get to a point where you just go back to the sideline, shake your head, say, hey, this one's just not going our way tonight, fellas. And you flush it and you move on. So yeah, not great. Clearly, this is no shock to anybody. The Eagles linebacking core is not great, which is why getting the Shaq Leonard upgrade is important.
Yep.
Hopefully we're going to have Zach Cunningham back from injury. If not this week, then soon. But yeah, the middle of the Eagles defense is soft, and I give all the credit in the world to Kyle Shanahan and to Brock Purdy. They came in with a very good game plan set to attack the weak spots in the Philadelphia defense. They were focused. They were motivated. They did a lot of things to nullify the pass rush from the Eagles front four.
Yep.
And Purdy gets the ball out quickly, better than maybe only a handful of guys in the league. And they played well defensively. And so there's not too much more to take from it other than to say these regular season blowouts are very often not indicative of how things look in the postseason. And, I'm not making any excuses, but you can understand after the stretch they played, you're on third game of a 10-game stretch. Like, that's maybe when you're going to get licked, as Joe would say.
Yeah, no question. And listen, there are so many things that factor into postseason football, which is always completely different than the regular season. Health, and obviously San Francisco, health is an issue, and they were healthy this week.
Yep.
I mean, by and large, like very healthy. But who's healthy going into the postseason compared to the other teams that make the playoffs? Who has a little momentum? But again, so much of it just comes down to the week by week matchup in those playoffs and who can ramp it up another gear. And yeah, I'm with you. The regular season meetings are virtually meaningless. I think they help both teams get an idea for what the personnel is on the other team. It helps, I think, when you see that up close and in person. But entirely different game plans, entirely different atmosphere, all of that. And yeah, it was a tough day for the Eagles, but I think you're exactly right. You move on, and again, the fun thing I think for the Eagles fans, unlike the Steelers, what we thought was a nice thing is, at least you can pile up some W's here, but they're not attractive matchups. Now you don't even know if you're going to pile up the W's. For the Eagles, this is it feels like the kind of the Penn State teams in the mid '80s there, where it's like Notre Dame, Nebraska, Alabama, West Virginia. Doug Flutie led the Boston College. All of these teams are on there. It's like every week, and there were some. I get it. There were some down games there too, but I mean, this stretch of 6 games for the Eagles, it's like win or lose. All right, let's get fired up now, ready to go for the next week. And yeah, it's a bummer with San Francisco, but my gosh, what team would you rather be facing to get everybody fired up than the Dallas Cowboys coming off of that? So,
yes, sir.
Yeah, we'll see. Speaking of being fired up, I was fired up to watch the Penguins and Flyers last night, and then not so much fired up. I get it's early in the season. I'm not overly worked up about it, but doggone it. It's a game the Penguins should be winning. We're just hovering, I think, now back to 1 game over 500, I think, on the season. I don't know. They need to go on another little tear here to get some good vibes going to the Penguins. But Flyers to this point are playing better than expected. I think that's fair to say for sure.
I think that's fair. I mean, I wouldn't even describe myself as cautiously optimistic. I mean, I'm just cautious at this point. I do think the major overhaul they had in their front office, I know this maybe sounds dumb, and this is kind of like a dumb sports broadcaster cliche. I don't know how much this really matters, but I do believe that sometimes like vibes make a difference. Organizational culture does matter. And there was such an improvement. I mean, such a vast improvement from transitioning from the old regime to the new, that I do think I credit some of the early season success with that there's just, I think, more focus and positivity in the building. When it comes to the Penguins, man, like I can't claim to have followed it super closely other than because the way I use X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it is purely. My daughter was talking to me about this the other night. She's like, all these people with these crazy opinions on Twitter. And I'm like, I use it for one purpose only. That's to interact with the obligatory audience. I'm not on there to talk politics. I'm not on there to post pictures of my life, any of that. I'm there to talk to Penn State fans. And I love it. I really enjoy that. Obviously, there's a lot of crossover between the Penn State fan audience and the Penguin fan audience. Yeah. So I follow a lot of accounts where I see commentary from the Penguins fans, and the natives seem to be very restless.
They are indeed.
I mean, I'm seeing a lot of calls already for a coaching change, which again you see happen a lot of times in the NHL. Like the NHL to me is the weirdest sport.
It is
in terms of switching out coaches. I mean, are you there yet? Do you think they need to make that kind of a dramatic move?
I'm not, but I am always late. Like I can't even remember the last time, and it's obviously worked out several times for the Penguins. I can't remember the last time that I was excited about the coaching switch. And to me, I'm always. I may be overly cautious. I mean, we talk about it with Franklin all the time. It's like I just think it's more likely that you're not going to get the right guy than the right guy.
Sure.
And I mean, Sullivan is a good, I don't think there's anybody that's saying he's a bad coach. It's just that, that the thinking is it's for whatever reason, wearing thin, getting stale,
that
whatever.
Happens.
And I mean, it was, Andy Reid with the Eagles. I don't think Philadelphia fans, even at the time, nobody was like, this Andy Reid can't coach. It's just like, it's just not working.
It's worn out.
They need to change it over. So, I don't feel that way with the Penguins. I think they'll get this thing going in the right direction as the season goes along under Sullivan. But I mean, I have a lot of fans or a lot of friends that follow it more closely than I do, and they're like, I think it may be that time. So we'll see. Folks, we thank you for joining us on the program today. We will be back Thursday with another edition of the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show here on Facebook Live and WFXS Pleasant Gap State College. Until Thursday's show, be good And
Coast into fall with a new Kia from Lion Country Kia. Right now, get a 24 Kia Seltos for 5.25% APR for up to 48 months. A new Sportage plug-in hybrid at 0.9% APR. Check out our 23 Sorento hybrid for as low as 4.5% APR. And don't forget, all 2023 and 2024 Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited warranty. Stop in and meet with one of our sales experts today and coast into fall at Lion Country Kia. We want to see you in a Kia.
Since retiring, I have spent my time searching the countryside for the hottest wings in America. I always seem to end up disappointed. You call these hot? Back off, Luigi.
Mamma mia.
Your handsy busboy. Your wings suck. I knew I should have stuck with Quaker Steak's triple atomic wings. You think I'm tough enough?
The Center Hall Farm Store has been serving Center County and beyond for well over a half century. A small family business, the Center Hall Farm Store specializes in animal nutrition and manufactures its feed fresh using local ingredients. Get the best in horse, cow, pig, chicken, and bird feeds. If you're not already a customer, stop in and see why so many of your neighbors are. The Center Hall Farm Store at 110 West Allison Street in Center Hall, or call us at 814-364-1393.
Sioka Toyota of Williamsport invites you to stop in today or check us out online. We have the smart path to your next Toyota, like the all-new Crown, BZ4X, the all-new Grand Highlander, Corolla Cross Hybrids, Sequoias, and more. Over 100 new Toyotas here and on the way. Don't make a $1,000 mistake. Choose Sioka Toyota of Williamsport and see the Sioka dealership's difference. Buy or reserve yours today and see for yourself why Sioka Toyota is the only stop you need for your next new car. Sioka Toyota, it just feels right.
Ready to be part of something bigger? Come pave the road to success at Glen O'Habaker and discover a career where your hard work and determination can build a bigger, better future. Our team believes we can build a stronger future together. Join us at Glen O'Habaker, where we value teamwork on the field and on the job. Go to GOHcareers.com to apply. GOHcareers.com. And best of luck to all the Center County sports teams all season long from everyone at Glen O'Habaker.
The Goon and Ironhead.